All right, this is Randall Snarski on the 12th of October 2017. I'm interviewing Mr. Joshua Hammer here for my Education 200.001 class. Place of interview is Sandwich High School after hours, so none of the kids are here. And Mr. Hammer here teaches science class, especially my favorite for him, the physical science class I got to take with him. He is an all-around education level, 9 through 12.
Yep.
How long have you been teaching?
So I have been teaching for, 14 years full-time. I don't know if I had ever told you, I had that 1 year when I was subbing, and then they asked me to permanently sub. So I had done almost a full year of subbing, and then I got my then I went back to get my master's and my certification, and then came back after that to be full-time. So
how would you compare that sub-teaching to that of a full-time teacher in a designated school?
If it, doing the actual subbing was, there's some easier things about it, some not as easy. It's easier because there's not a lot of expectations in terms, usually when you're there, you're just kind of trying to do whatever you're doing for that day or whatever. And usually the atmosphere can be laid back or whatever. But on the flip side, because you're a sub, it's not your room. You don't have the rapport with the students maybe as much, so that can make it a little difficult walking. You're kind of walking in cold to a room or whatever. Now the permanent subbing I did, they had a teacher quit about 2 or 3 months in, and they called me up and asked me if I could finish the whole rest of the year out. And that was. It was a little rough, but because I was kind of making everything up on the fly as I went. So, but it was good. I mean, that's basically. I mean, that was basically the same as teaching. I just was a permanent sub because I wasn't certified.
Would you say that would be your defining factor in when you become a full-fledged teacher? Was that experience?
Yeah, because both of my parents were teachers, and I actually didn't want to be a teacher at first, and then I was subbing to make some money while I was looking for jobs after college, and when I had that permanent subbing job, there were some really rough classes. Like, the teacher that quit didn't have any discipline, and so it was kind of a zoo when I got in there, but I managed to kind of get a rapport with the students, and it wasn't perfect. There was a lot of stuff, but I figured if I can survive that, because I hadn't had any training really, because I hadn't taken any education classes. My undergrad was in bio.
Oh.
So I hadn't taken any education classes. So I figured if I can survive that and I still liked it and I felt like I was good at it, that probably something that I wanted to do. So
That's nice.
Worked out well.
What made you pick high school of all grades? Were you teaching lower grades when you were a sub, or?
When I subbed, I did some different ones. If you want to grab anything to put under, you can. I did all grade subbing. I knew that I did not like junior high. I just can't deal with the craziness and all the goofy juice being squirted into their brains. And little kids are okay, but they're exhausting. It's just, I remember subbing in young grades, and I walk out of there like, what bus just hit me, because they're just on the go constantly, And so I like high school a lot. I feel like high schoolers, even though they're still growing and maturing, I mean, there's a huge difference between freshman year and senior year. I mean, you probably remember. But even with that, in high school, I feel like there's a maturity level where most high school students respond well to being treated with respect. And if I treat them as, I wouldn't say as equals, but as a more mature, young adult versus a kid, that's how I generally relate to my students anyway. And if I do that, I find usually I get a better result. I get more respect from them, and they listen to me. I don't really have any problems, stuff like that. So I like that age because it's an age where most of the students want to be treated with respect and want to be treated more like adults. And then because that's how I want to have an interaction with my students, it seems to kind of work well together. So,
if you could, would you switch the subject you teach right now?
No.
You like teaching biology and
Science.
sciences?
I don't teach bio anymore,
You don't
but I teach. So I've got chemistry, chemistry 1, chemistry 2, and environmental. But no, I wouldn't. Although, interestingly enough, I had my bio degree. My undergrad was my bio degree, and so, but when I came here, when I got hired back here after I got my master's, almost every teacher in the department had a bio degree. So since I was a low man on the totem pole, I got the stuff that nobody wanted to teach, which was like physical science and chemistry. And I wasn't a big fan at first, but after teaching it for several years, I started to understand it and kind of figure out how I could work in examples and stuff like that. Like I love chem now. I wouldn't go back to bio or any other subject at all for anything. I love.
In what ways have you enriched those subjects? Because I know in my personal experience in class, you got very hands-on with physical science, with having to do with all the projectiles and building objects.
Yep.
So how did you get those lessons plans instilled in the curriculum?
Well, okay, so one thing about being at Sandwich is that we're small enough that, yes, we have multiple teachers teaching the same subject, so we try to kind of keep that aligned generically, but they basically let us, as long as we're meeting the general, the objectives and that kind of stuff, as long as we're going along with that, they let us determine our own curriculum in the way that we want to introduce material and teach it and things like that. So some of the stuff that you were referring to was actually stuff that I just made up myself. Like I knew what I wanted you guys to think about and learn, and then I just tried to come up with a way to make it somewhat interesting. So I do that with a lot of different stuff. I did that more with physical science because that we didn't need to get as detailed into it because I don't know if you remember, we did like a little bit of chemistry, a little bit of physics, a little bit. So we didn't have to get super in depth into it. So we could do some more of those cursory things. With chemistry, it's a little harder. There's a lot of stuff you can do, but there's a lot more background knowledge that I need them to know to do some of the labs and activities that we do. So I don't create those myself as much as I do as I did with the physical science. Those I usually use from either like the science catalog, and I might adapt them a little bit or stuff like that. But
what is your typical day here at Sandwich High School as a teacher?
My typical day.
And include all the extra stuff you have to do, like go watch the parking lot, everything.
Okay.
I want to hear the real.
Well, my typical day, I struggle with organization. I don't know if you remember or not, but I usually tell all my kids that I have ADD. I legitimately do. I take medication for it. So I struggle with organization and stuff like that. So I usually try to get here very early so I can make sure I've got everything set for the day, and it kind of helps me. So I'm usually here I'd say I'm usually here around 6:30 in the morning.
And the average day, the day starts at 8 o'clock, correct?
Technically the school, we teachers we're supposed to be here minimum by 7:45.
All right.
So, but I usually try to get here somewhere between 6:15 and 6:45, because that gives me anywhere from half an hour to an hour to just make sure I've got organized, make sure I've got all my copies made, do all that. Because to be honest, by about 6:15, 6:30ish, I usually have a bunch of kids in my room, and either they're asking help or they're just in here kind of hanging out. And it's just with being easily distracted, I don't get as much done then. So I need to have that guaranteed time where I know that I have time where really nobody's here, and I can just make sure I have everything. That way I'm calm and it's not really hectic and stuff. So I usually get here around 6:30ish, somewhere around there. Like I said, I'll have students in here 7:15, 7:30, helping them, doing other things. Day starts at 8 o'clock. This year I have an overload. So a typical school schedule is 5 class periods, like teaching 5 periods. One, what we call supervision, which would be like you supervise a study hall or
in school
suspension or some like lunch duty, like that's a supervision. So you have one of those, and then one prep period, that like free period, so you can work on stuff. But an overload is where I don't have a supervision. I have a sixth class that I teach. So I teach 6 classes. I have 4 chemistry 1s, 1 chemistry 2, and 1 environmental. And then this year, we also instituted an advisory class, which it's kind of hard to explain. It's kind of like a homeroom, but the goal is to get students to have a teacher that they feel comfortable with talking about things. So if they have questions or they have problems, they can go to somebody.
So do people with IEPs come to this class especially,
Yeah.
or is it
Yep.
just every other, like regular kids can go in this too?
It's everybody.
Everybody?
So it's what they did is they carved out, it's a 25-minute period, I think, or so, and they carved it out by shortening every period a few minutes. So our day is not any longer, but we carved this 25-minute period out, and it's a period where everybody's here. So there's nobody at IVIC. Like everybody in the whole building is here. And what they did is they split up, and you're in groups of about anywhere from like 20 to 24 students with a teacher. And this is the first year we've done it. The idea though is that you are with the same teacher all 4 years of your high school. So like, for example, I have freshmen this year. So the freshman class that I have, theoretically, if everything works the way it's supposed to, I will have those kids for advisory all 4 years. So they get to know me. They're somebody they're comfortable with.
You're one of the teachers.
You know,
kind of. You're the guinea pigs as well, because you're the ones teaching the freshmen.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, it's good and bad. Like it's like one of the things I like with the freshmen is because they don't know any better in terms of like their first year in high school, they've had advisory, so they've never had high school without advisory. Whereas like seniors and juniors are a little more, they're set in their ways. You know what I mean? Like it's like, oh, this new thing is kind of dumb, blah blah, whatever.
It's just time to take a little nap or relax.
Yeah. But the nice thing is that it is that kind of like that. It's like a decompression thing. Like they're not allowed to do homework, and different advisories have different rules about. But I don't let mine have their cell phones, because the goal is for them to be interactive as a group with both me and each other. So it's really trying to improve like the social emotional connections that they have around. So I'm busy right now.
Okay.
It's really trying to improve those connections. It came from a survey. What year, you graduated 2 years ago?
Yes, 2016.
Okay, so you remember taking those surveys where it would ask you about a bunch of things about the school, everything from like grades to like, you know, how is the school physically? It's all about that. There was one question that was, is there an adult in the high school that you feel comfortable enough to go with if you needed to ask a question or have a problem or something like that?
Yes, I remember this.
Okay, and only 1/3, 33% of the students that answered that said that there was somebody that they felt comfortable going to. So that was something that we identified as being something we wanted to change culture-wise. So that's part of this advisory thing. Is one of the things is we want every student to have at least one teacher that they feel at least. You don't have to be best friends. You don't have to think that the teacher is the best teacher ever, but have somebody that you're at least comfortable with, knowing that you can go there and ask questions, get help, with something if you need it or whatever. So.
What do you enjoy least about teaching?
What do I enjoy least?
No sugarcoating.
What I enjoy least is the sort of like paperwork hoop stuff to jump through. Evaluation. The evaluation doesn't really bother me as much. It's more of the it's like the recording of what I do. I feel that's a waste of my time. Lesson plans, to an extent, I think there's value in them, but I also think to a certain extent that's a little bit of a waste of my time. depends on how detailed they are, I guess. That's how detailed they want. I think super detailed ones are a waste of my time because I can better be spending that time creating a lab, setting up, getting ready for labs, setting things up, making new activities, actually doing something that will benefit the students versus paperwork that gets set in a file somewhere that nobody ever looks at that says, oh, I did X, Y, and Z. Which is just basically covering yourself to say, if anybody ever came and looked and said, well, how do we know that you did this? And you can say, well, it's because I wrote it down, and I wrote down that I did that, which in reality, how does that really prove you did it anyway? It just proves that you did the paperwork.
Very true.
So that's the part that I like the least about it. It takes away from what I see as being valuable, which is me using my time to help students.
What surprised you most when you started teaching? Not just here, but in general.
What surprised me most? Gosh. I don't know. I think having two parents as teachers, there wasn't a lot that really surprised me. Yeah, I honestly can't say there was really much.
Would you say there's anything that maybe your parents were surprised about hearing when you started teaching and started talking to them about what's going on in the school system? Or are they still teachers to this day?
No, they're both retired now. They taught until they retired. But okay, actually, what if I were to say one thing that surprised me was because I came from a family that both of my parents were teachers, so they were very school oriented, made sure we did well and were on, kind of. And one thing that did somewhat surprise me is seeing how many students get little to no support from their family at home.
Really?
In terms of academically, it's not that they're not necessarily supportive of them as their children, but in terms of there was a much higher percentage of parents that either didn't have the ability to help their kids do well in school or didn't have the desire to. And then there's another whole subsection of students whose parents didn't care at all how they did in school.
Really?
And that surprised I think that surprised me a lot. Probably just coming from my background, I didn't really realize how there's a lot of students that what they do academically and otherwise, they do on their own. It's them. They're not, they have to kind of sometimes even be the adult in the situation. I mean, I know several examples of students who are basically the adult in their family. They're taking care of little brothers and trying to do all their schoolwork and stuff at the same time. So I think that surprised me, the number of kids that have, I guess, unstable or not ideal home lives that they have to juggle along with all. School's hard enough as it is, So, yeah.
Two-part question here. Where did you go to college to get your certification at, and what do you wish that they taught you during that program that they didn't?
So my undergrad was at Knox College. That was in bio, and then my graduate, I got my master's in teaching certification at the same time, and that was in education. That was at Aurora University. For my education classes, I feel there's some value in doing sort of like the history of education stuff and the sort of like the pedagogy and stuff like that, but I feel like I wish they would have done a little less of the I don't even know how to say it, like the philosophy part of it, even though I like philosophy, but I wish they would have done a little less stress on the philosophical framework of how you teach and why you teach, and maybe more on literal application of skills of teaching, because and no matter how good of a program you are, like there's nothing like being in a classroom. Like there's just stuff you can't prepare for. They can't prepare you for it. They can't prepare you for a kid standing up on a lab station threatening to beat the absolute living crap out of another kid because they're bothering him, and
See that?
There's stuff that. There's stuff that happens that you're like, wow, didn't know that was going to ever happen. But I think actual application, that's still a struggle to these days whenever they come up with a new core curriculum or this or that, is the ideas behind it. Everybody, like all the teachers understand the ideas behind it. It's how do I actually put that into practice and be effective and not beat my head against the wall at the same time. Get overwhelmed with trying to do that. So
couldn't imagine the stress that would entail with that. If you can give someone advice about wanting to become a teacher, what would you give them?
I would say two things. One, you need to be if you're going into teaching, you need to make sure you love it, and that you actually love teaching. For me, that's like my personality. Like I'm a teacher. Like I do it at school. I do it everywhere. That's just how I am. I love teaching people things. I like showing them things, like helping them out. Because even if you love it, there's going to be days when you aren't so fond of your job. Like there's days when I'm kind of like, God, I wish I wasn't here today or whatever. But if you don't love it and it's just you're coming in to pick up a paycheck, then you're gonna be burned out before you even start. So I'd say that, and then the other thing in terms of kind of advice I would say is be prepared to work your butt off. People have different ways of going about things, but to be an effective teacher, I believe that you're constantly improving your strategies, changing things. I mean, you knew that from things that we did in some of those classes. I mean, I'd have something and I'd be like, oh, well, that didn't work the way I thought. Let's try this instead, and be flexible. Being flexible, treating your students with respect, and be ready to work your butt off.
I'm just taking time.
No, you're good.
Okay. We're at the time, but I have a couple more questions.
That's fine. I'm good. I'm going to be here.
What would be about the beginning salary for someone coming into this district as a high school educator?
You want to pause for a second? I can grab it and tell you for sure. So I should have salary schedules. Here we go, 34. So, excuse me. This year, if you came in with a bachelor's degree and no years of experience in Sandwich, you would be at $38,600.
That's not too bad, actually.
Yeah.
That's very competitive.
Yeah, they do. We're pretty good. Now, on the salary schedule, they've done one thing, which is there's two ways that you advance on the salary schedule. One is you teach longer, more years, and that's you go. See the salary schedule here. That you move down your years of experience. Okay, and then the other way is by getting more education, taking classes, getting your master's, stuff like that, and that's across the top here. So what you can see all these dark squares here. Mm-hmm. If you just have your bachelor's and you don't do any other class or anything like that, you stop making more money after your 8th year. So what they've done is they've shortened the number of years that if you have your bachelor's, that you can keep making more money, because what they're trying to do is they're trying to basically force you to get more education. They want more educated teachers. So it's beneficial for you as a teacher to, as soon as possible, start getting more education and getting over to your master's, because as you see in the master's row, you keep gaining money all the way through your 24th or 25th year.
Wow.
So they set it up like this to encourage you to get more education, which theoretically then helps the school because you've got more educated teachers who are better at their jobs, ideally.
One of the last few questions I have is, what toll does this job take on your personal life? With your family, your friends, everything?
So different people manage it differently. I am not a person who manages. I'm a very tunnel vision type person probably because of my ADD and stuff. I tend to just be. I can't multitask. I need to focus on one thing or whatever. So during the school year, I don't do a whole heck of a lot of else. Now, I've gotten better. I mean, I used to be here. I would stay at school till 5 or 6 every day, working on stuff, doing things like that, and later than most people. And it did take a toll. I was not, like I said, I was not good at multitasking and doing, kind of balancing. Balancing is the word. I was not good at balancing my personal life with my school. Like I would just spend so much time doing school stuff. I've gotten a lot better. You get older, I've got a lot of stuff already prepared, so I don't have to do quite as much work on some of that. I'm more efficient with certain things, and I've just gotten better at realizing that there's always things you can do. So at some point you just got to stop and take a breath and say, it'll be here tomorrow. I'm good for now. Take some time. So it's not a 9-to-5 job. Like, no matter how efficient you are, it's not a 9-to-5 job. Like, you're gonna have to take stuff home, grade over the weekend, get plans together, do something like that. The more efficient people that are more organized, more efficient, usually can probably knock a lot of that out maybe more easily than I can. But I've gotten a lot better at spending not as much time. So it's kind of up to you. It's kind of up to the person themselves. Like, you have to monitor yourself and make sure that you are that you take that personal time, because it can. I mean, I know people that have, basically, it's hard on relationships if you don't do that. So.
If you could just pick one piece of advice, one tip to give someone that's wanting to become a teacher so badly, what would you give to them? It's the last question, by the way.
Oh, you're good. I like doing this because I like people that are actually interested. We need good teachers. We need people that are excited about teaching. In terms of them getting their, doing their education, or in terms of
getting through the trials and tribulations of becoming the teacher and being the teacher.
To be honest, I think I mentioned this before, but I would say flexibility. Be flexible. I mean, even in a high school, stuff happens all the time, and it's unexpected. Be flexible. Don't, if you're so rigid that something throws you off, then you're be flexible. Be treat your students with respect. And then the other thing I would say is have a short memory. And that's one thing that I actually prided myself on in terms of being a teacher, and I think it's why even sometimes difficult students I got along with, is because a student could come in and have a bad day, and I could give them attention, kick them out, do whatever, but they come back the next day, and if they're fine, I'm fine. Everybody has bad days, you know what I mean? I'm not going to hold it against them. I mean, unless it was something so bad that we need to sort of clear the air, and then I would do that one-on-one or whatever. But I can't. Even to this day, I can't tell you. There's not one student that I carry a grudge at for anything that happened in class or anything like that. And I think if you approach it like that, you will be a lot like as a as coming in, you'll be a lot happier,
Right.
like kind of like forgive and forget type of thing. Now it doesn't mean let people walk all over you, but have that short memory, be willing to start new. And I think that because if you don't, then that's when, like you said, stuff starts overwhelming and building up. So that's what I'd say.
Thank you very much for your time and effort
You're
today.
welcome.
I really do appreciate it.
Thank you. I hope it helped.
I hope it does.
Thanks for coming in.